Tropical Storm Lee is only about a day away, as the National Hurricane Center has now given the disturbance 95L a near 100% chance of formation. Behind it, there is another tropical wave, a strong one moving off Africa, which is likely to develop into another named storm out there. That one might not be a problem for anyone. And so in this video, we will be focusing on all that is happening with these disturbances, as well as current activity across the Caribbean and surrounding areas. And before I go into details, please do subscribe if you haven't yet done so, and tap the bell so that you never miss an important video. And so let us go ahead and kickstart things looking at this Outlook map. And here we can see a new area highlighted, but it is not exactly new. That is the remnants of Franklin up there that could try to redevelop some subtropical characteristics as it loiters offshore of Europe. So we'll see what happens with that one there. There we have our next tropical wave, which is about to make its way off Africa, currently given a medium chance of development. There we have 95L, and we'll go into a lot of detail with the disturbance very soon. There we have Depression Katia, which should become post-tropical maybe by tonight, and then Gert is a post-tropical cyclone. So the final advisory was issued earlier today by the National Hurricane Center. And so in terms of what is happening for the Caribbean, let's go on to the satellite imagery. Let's zoom in here, and we can see that there is a lot of thunderstorm activity developing across some areas, especially as we look to sections of northern Hispaniola, over in sections of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, some parts of Jamaica, Cuba, and even near the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos Islands. And there isn't much happening for the Cayman Islands as of when I'm recording. Heading over into Central America, we can definitely see those thunderstorms popping up across different areas this afternoon. Sections of Belize, going to Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. So some areas are being impacted. Not much happening for the ABC Islands. And then as we head to Puerto Rico, there is a bit of activity in some areas, but the Virgin Islands and most of the Lesser Antilles are in the clear right now, including Barbados. But as we head to Trinidad and Tobago, as I pointed out in this morning's update, there was some activity moving west, and here we see some of it arriving, maybe bringing some overcast conditions and passing showers to some areas. Nothing too crazy right now. And then as we head into the Guyanas, we don't see a whole lot happening. Some thunderstorms popping up across parts of Guyana, but for Suriname and French Guiana, we're not seeing that really happening right now. And so guys, today, the 4th of September, is the resumption of public schools in many countries. So the kids are back out, and I just want to implore you, parents or guardians, to ensure that they're equipped for the weather, because it might be very sunny in the morning, but then as the day goes on, especially as those afternoon hours set in, it starts to rain. There are lots of thunderstorms. That's something we typically see as we head into September, especially here in Jamaica. So I just want to urge you to ensure that the young ones are equipped for that type of weather. And even with this, at times there is flooding taking place across some areas. So it's also good to devise a plan to say that, okay, in the case of emergency, when I can't immediately reach to you, this is where you go. It should be somewhere safe for the child or children. So that is something important to have in place with the resumption of school. And so guys, now we want to go ahead and talk about 95L. So going back to NHC's outlook, here we're seeing it 100% chance, a near 100% chance of formation through the next 7 days, high 90% through the next 2 days. So by tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier, we could have Tropical Storm Lee and then gradual intensification following thereafter due to a conducive environment. So looking at the dry air map, there we see some of that dust and dry air in parts of the Eastern Caribbean. That's what's helping to limit rainfall right now. And then we've got that disturbance. We see that most of the dry air, those denser areas of dry air, lie to the north of it. So it should be moving on a westward track to west-northwestward and eventually northwestward track, and thus the environment should be conducive enough to allow for that gradual intensification. And then as we take a look at the wind shear map here, these areas, these green lines, they represent the favorable shear, and then yellow means neutral, red means unfavorable. That is when those upper level winds are pretty strong, and they prevent those thunderstorms from developing nicely around the system. And we see more of a lopsided or asymmetrical storm when that wind shear is in action, and also something weaker. So we've really helps to weaken these systems. But for now, we can see that the shear ahead is generally favorable. So we should see that intensification happening over the course of the next couple of days. And let's now go ahead and take a look at what models have to show. So I will be going into what the GFS, Euro, Canadian, and Icon model have to show. We're looking for consistency here, although noting the fact that there can be changes down the road, especially as we head further than 5 days out, because accuracy tends to decrease, and we're talking about the weather, which is always changing. So let's go ahead and kickstart things looking at the GFS run. So the green colors that you see, that is representing the precipitation rate, and those black squiggly lines are called isobars, and they join areas of equal pressure. What we're looking for is seeing them in circles, and when we see a lot of them that are tightly packed, that is indicative of strengthening. Let's see what GFS has to show. There we have the forecast time. As we head into tomorrow, Wednesday, we see rapid development expected of the system into a tropical storm, and then eventually a hurricane maybe by Thursday, and then GFS has it continually intensifying. We see the pressure there in the 940s indicating major hurricane strength. So this could potentially become a Cat 4 hurricane out there, and what we're seeing GFS being consistent about, contrary to previous runs, is that hey, this is going to be strengthening a lot, and it will stay outside the Caribbean. In one of the previous runs yesterday, I believe, it was showing something struggling to get itself together and moving through the northern Caribbean islands, but now it is hopping on to what other models are saying, to say that hey, this is going to be just outside the region. Nonetheless, it could be close enough to allow for impacts to be felt in northeastern islands. So that is what GFS has to show. It also shows development of that next tropical wave. Now we want to move on to the Canadian model. So as we head going into tomorrow and Wednesday, there we have the system getting itself together and strengthen. There we have that next tropical wave strengthen as well, moving out to sea, and then the system passing north of the Caribbean before making that curve. So the Canadian is not expecting that this will be continuing into the Bahamas, the Turks and Caicos Islands, and even the US, but it is showing somewhat of a northerly track here, and with that, we want to watch for Bermuda being impacted by this. Recent systems have impacted Bermuda, Idalia, Franklin, so we'll have to watch this one as well. Again, what's to happen down the road is uncertain because there can be changes. Let's head on to Icon. Icon is showing something pretty interesting here and has been consistent with it. There we see development as we head later into this week, that next wave developing as well. So it's almost certain that the next tropical wave will become our next named storm after Lee, which the next name is Margot. So let's see here. Icon is expecting that this will be making a much closer approach to the Caribbean compared to our other models. So this is very interesting here, and this is not out of the picture, this is not off the table, because there are many possibilities. So Icon showing that the Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, even the Dominican Republic could be affected by the system, and that is where the model run ends. And finally, we're going on to the Euro model. Euro is showing gradual development as well as we head further down into this week. There we have that next tropical wave developing, so we see the models being consistent about that next wave becoming something, and Euro has been showing this system becoming a major hurricane passing north of the northeastern islands of the Caribbean. So based on all these 4 model runs that we just looked at, Icon is the only one taking it very close to the Caribbean, to the point where impacts could be felt. And that is something that I have been emphasizing a lot, the fact that the center does not dictate the size. It can be offshore and you can still feel impacts. You could still experience a lot of heavy rainfall. There could still be flooding. So let's go on to the latest track guidance here, the latest model track guidance. Again, we have a really good consistency for the past couple of days with our invest here. We're seeing them shift a little bit up to the north, taking the system even further away from the Caribbean, and they're kind of tightly packed. So again, consistency with that northwestward track that is anticipated of the system. And then in terms of the intensity guidance here, we can see that most models expect this to become a major hurricane. Several several calling for a Cat 4, and Euro has been calling for a major hurricane for some time now, at one point expecting a Cat 5, or at least showing the pressure that would be indicative of a Cat 5 hurricane. So the lower the pressure is, the stronger the system. So I do believe that this will become our next named storm, maybe by tomorrow evening or so, and eventually a hurricane and major hurricane. And what is fortunate about this is the fact that we have this kind of consistency that, hey, this could remain outside the Caribbean, because surely we don't want a Cat 4 or Cat 5 hitting anyone, or even a Cat 3. And then in terms of long-term impacts to the US or even Atlantic Canada, I have been watching the models, but again, we're talking about way far out in the future. There can be many changes. So it is good to keep watch on the system as time goes by. But as we head further and further into this week, go into this weekend, we're going to have a much better picture of what is ahead in terms of any North American impacts from this, because there might not be any and there could be. So we really just don't know at this point in time. But for now, we're seeing this pretty good consistency on the system staying outside the Caribbean. But again, it could be close enough to induce impact. And I will be keeping you guys posted as we head throughout the next several days. So that is what I wanted to share with you in this evening update. And I hope you found it to be quite informative. But if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll respond to you once I get the chance to do so. And as always, remember to be weatherwise.